You're listening to SM Media, the #1 place for exclusive content.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of All Time 11 right here on SM Media. I'm Scott McPike, delighted to be your host as always. I'm joined in this episode by a very special guest, the voice of Scottish football on BT and Premier Sports. It's a great pleasure to welcome Rory Hamilton from BT. Rory, it's a pleasure to be on, mate. Thanks very much for coming on. I really appreciate you coming on.
No, thanks, Scott. It's good to be on because we've tried to get this on the go for a month or so. So yeah, at least we've got there eventually.
Brilliant. Obviously, you're probably one of the busiest men in Scottish football over the past few months. What's it been like for you? Been non-stop, obviously doing Europa League, Celtic TV, Scottish Cup, League Cup. It's been busy time.
Yeah, and you know, you add into that, I do the Pro 14 rugby on Premier as well. So they actually moved a bunch of games to Monday night. So I was going, brilliant, because it's not going to clash with any of the football. But then you're working Thursday night Europa League. You know, Saturday is probably Ross County TV, followed by Sports Scene. Sunday Celtic TV. Monday Pro 14, and then we've had a few like Tuesday, Wednesdays in the Betfred Cup as well. And then you throw in Scottish Cup semi-finals. Honestly, it's after 4 months of zero work, it's now easily the busiest I've been in my whole career. And I'm doing 4 games a week pretty much every week. And when you add in all the prep time and things that goes into that, it doesn't leave you with a lot of time. But to be honest, at the moment, we're not allowed to be doing anything else. So it's one of those things that you're like, well, you might as well be working. I'm one of the lucky ones that's able to go to football games, which you never take that for granted because people are desperate to go to the games, and it's a real shame that they can't. And I'm fortunate enough that I can.
Mm-hmm. So, what's your overall thoughts been in the season so far? Obviously, it's been a pretty wild season. Obviously, with no fans, but obviously the league's Rangers on the driving seat just now. What's been your kind of thoughts so far in the league season?
I think this season, even from the outset, whatever happens, it's going to be a major story. Yeah. And that, when you're a broadcaster, that's what you want to happen. You don't want the predictable outcomes all the time that you can see in August, who's going to be lifting trophies in May. You want that excitement really comes from unpredictability. And I think, it's no fault of Celtic's, but Scottish football over the last 9 years has been relatively unpredictable. Barring a few of the cups. So Celtic absolutely in their right to go on and clear the decks of all the trophies. But this season they're getting the challenge from Rangers, and it's brilliant that we're developing a story. Either you're getting a 10 in a row, or you're getting the team that breaks 10 in a row. Yeah. And that in itself is a story. And I feel like after this season, Scottish football can do a bit of a reset.
I think that's happening, yeah.
And I think a lot of people might just welcome that.
Definitely. Well, make a wee start in your team. Obviously, we've kind of talked back and forward about this. So, how are you going to set up? Like, how are you going to do your team? Is it take players you've watched in your kind of time following football? Or
Yeah. So that's what I've done. I made rules that I had to have seen them play live.
Right, okay.
And they had to have played in Scotland or for Scotland.
Right, okay.
And then I did, because this actually made it easier for me, but then just before we came on, I started tweaking things around, doing a bit of a Claudio Ranieri. And then I was like, no, right, 2 per club.
Right, okay.
I mean, there will be some that have played for more than one club, obviously, but I tried to keep it as their predominant club and to keep it to no more than 2. So I think it probably means that you maybe don't have it's not the most talented 11, but I wanted that variety. And there's so many players from so many clubs that I've had an appreciation for over my time. So yeah.
Just before we get started, I just want to ask, like, obviously the camaraderie in the BT Sport pundits is brilliant, but like, did any of them make the team?
Do you know what? See, this was the one that I put in and then I took out because of my own rule of 2 per team. So I scratched out one name and I put in Ali McCoist, and then I went, well, now I've got 3 Rangers players. so I just reverted back to what I had. So Ali got ditched.
Brilliant. What formation are you going to go with?
I'm just bog standard 4-4-2.
Brilliant.
Because I mean, I think, to be honest, at the moment we make so much of formations, and I find it from broadcasting, one of the first things that, you know, the graphics guys and the stats guys always say, the commentator, go and speak to the manager, see what formation they're playing and see who's playing where, so we can put it up in a team graphic. And A, the majority of the time they don't want to. B, they can give you something that's not accurate. And C, modern formations they're so fluid. I mean, I don't think anyone really plays a direct 3-5-2, a 4-4-2, a 4-4-1-1. They're all a sort of abbreviation of a kind of 4-2-3-1 or a back 3 in the various formations that go around that. It's based off the defensive line, and then the midfields and forwards can interact so much. So I've set it up as a kind of 4-4-2, but I mean, some might say it's a diamond, and there's all sorts of things going on.
Brilliant. Let's get right into it. Let's start off with the goalkeeper. Who we got in the goalkeeper position?
So probably through all of these, I'll give you the ones that were in my consideration, and then so I've gone with Jim Leighton.
Right. Okay.
Again, he helped out because he ticked a different club box, so that was quite helpful to get him in. But I love that battle. I mean, the majority of the football that I think you hark back to is during your time as a kid and growing up, when you're playing the most football. And Jim Leighton against Andy Gorham for the Scotland jersey, I just always thought was a fascinating battle. And I think Andy Gorham had it for the main part, and obviously Jim Leighton took it for the '98 World Cup, and didn't have the best of times. And I did another podcast and I was asked to do my favourite Scotland 11 of all time, and it was between Andy and Jim, and I can't remember which one I went for, so I thought it was Andy, so I've gone with Jim this time to even it up. But you know, a few others that I think that stick out over the time for me. Theo Schnelder's always liked. He was a cracking goalkeeper. Stefan Kloss and Craig Gordon, I think, deserves a mention as well. And of course, he's got a cup final coming up this weekend, and after his heroics in the semi-final, you know, it might just be one of those ones that's written in the stars that it's his moment again.
Brilliant. We'll move on to right back. Who we got in there?
So, being a big Scotland fan who travels home and away for all my sins, watching Scotland, I've gone with Christian Daly. He's a huge Tartan Army legend. One of my early memories was watching. Well, I was out in Barry for the game when they lost 2-0 to Italy. I think Luca Toni got at least one, and I remember him, Christian Daly, at the end. I don't think he'd even got on, or he'd got on for the last few minutes or something. And all the Scotland fans were held in this old stadium in Barry with a big running track. So you're miles away. There's one of those moats, and Christian Daly doing his warm down, which was probably still a warm up because he hadn't played very much, and just lapping up the love of the Scotland fans. He probably did an extra 20 minutes, and it was just constant singing Christian Daly songs. So that's one of my sort of early memories of going abroad with football. And it's gone on from there. I think he also scored my first away game away in Lithuania. Him and Kenny Miller got the 2 goals, the 2-1 win. So yeah, he's he gets my vote for his curly hair as well.
Brilliant. We'll move on to left back. Who's at the other side of it?
Left back, Arthur Newman.
Right. Okay.
I think. Well, yeah. I mean, when he signed for Rangers, 1998, and he'd just come off the back of the World Cup in France, where he'd captained the Dutch team, and for some reason, I always loved the Dutch teams. Growing up, 94, 96, 98, those years, there's something about them. I really like the style of their play, I like the shirts. And Arthur Newman, probably at that time, he would have been up there as one of the best left backs in the world.
Definitely.
I mean, looking at that World Cup, you've got Roberto Carlos, who probably was the best left back in the world, or Paolo Maldini, Vicente Lizarazu. But Arthur Newman he's maybe a small bracket down from that, and it was at a time when a lot of really top players were actually coming to Scotland. I think we'd love to see, the Dutch starting left back who's in the top bracket in that position in the world coming to Scotland. I mean, we're so far short of that at the moment, but that was at a time when, I mean, he really was. I actually forgot to say the other names for the right back. I thought Stuart McKimmie would have been a good option. Left back, I think Andy Robertson deserves a mention because he's gone on to win Champions League and the Premier League in England. So yeah, and for what he's done with Scotland as well, really good. The other one, Takis Fisas, coming as
he was great,
as a European Championships winner to Hearts at a time when it was really exciting times for Hearts. So I enjoyed him, but Arthur Newman left back for me.
Yeah, when you touched on Fisas, we had Andy Webster on a couple of weeks ago, and I just asked. He said he was unbelievable.
Yeah,
he was brilliant.
There were a few good players in that team because they signed Edgaras Jankauskas as well, and I think he just won a Champions League.
Yeah, it was with Porto. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But brilliant. But we'll move on to the centre half position. Who have we got on the left side?
So left side, Virgil van Dijk. I mean, he's gone on to win World Footballer of the Year, win a Premier League and Champions League with Liverpool. I think when he signed for Celtic, was it Groningen he signed for?
Yes, it was, yeah.
I think you could see straight away how good he was, but maybe not realising just the extent of how far he could go.
Yeah.
It did take... I think I speak to Chris Sutton a lot about him, and he was telling managers down south at clubs like Liverpool, that sort of level, he's good enough to go now to that level. But they obviously wanted to see him down in England first at Southampton, so it worked as a good stepping stone. I think he wouldn't have been out of his depth going from Celtic to a top four team straight away. Absolute class act. I remember commentating on as a goal he scored up at St Johnstone when he ran it from halfway.
Yeah,
and he just kept going, and it opened up and he hit it, and you just thought, this is too easy for him. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think you see there are similar attributes in Christopher Ajer, but he's not got that physique that Van Dijk had, and maybe that calmness. Ajer obviously loves to step up, and he's comfortable in the ball, and he might develop because he's still young. But Van Dijk he had a presence. Mm-hmm. That there weren't really any flaws in his game that anyone could get at.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, he was absolutely brilliant up here. Well, who partners him in the centre back position?
It'll be quite an interesting partnership. I've gone with Frank Soze.
Okay.
Who, I mean, he's just a legend at Hibs.
Yeah.
A Champions League winner with Marseille. And I was actually surprised when I was reading up on it. I think it was 2 or 3 seasons that was all he played with Hibs. It wasn't that long, and it was obviously the end of his career. He retired after he left Hibs. But I love that Hibs team that went down to it would have been
First Division
at the time. Yeah. And I think I always remember seeing it and I made this argument for years that the crowds at Easter Road that season were bigger than when they were in the Premier League because they were winning, and there was this real buzz in Leith about that team, and they had Mixu and Latipi was just incredible as well. I mean, he's one that I would have happily put in my team if I could have fitted him in.
Yeah.
And Soze just, he had a presence, an arrogance. He could play defence, he could play midfield, he could have played up front if he'd wanted him to. Just a real class act, and I'm really surprised that it never worked out with management with him, because I would have thought he would have been exactly the character to get people to believe in his philosophy. But I think his managerial career started and ended with Hibs, and he won something like 1 in 15 games or something.
Yeah, it wasn't great, was it? See, when you see just the defending, like how much, like, for when you started football, do you think like defending's changed? Like, what do you think's kind of different now? Like, obviously you're talking about like Frank Soze and Christian Daly. Like, we don't see many kind of characters like that now defending.
No, I mean, you can't be quite as combative, ferocious, because you don't get away with the tackles that you once did. I mean, you can probably put that into the central midfield area as well.
Yeah.
That those sorts of players, it's impossible to exist. The tackling really isn't in the game anymore as it was when I was growing up. I always remember a quote from Xabi Alonso when he was at Liverpool, and he used to get really frustrated when all the young kids would be coming through the academy at Melwood, and no matter what position they played, every single one of them would say that, what are your best attributes? What are the things you do best in the game? And they'd all say tackling, because it's kind of ingrained in that British mentality that you give your all, you run about, you work hard, and you tackle, you don't shirk a challenge. And Alonso used to get really annoyed because he's like, I haven't made a tackle in my life, because if I have to tackle, it means I'm out of position. I just let them give me the ball instead, sort of thing. So that has changed. I mean, it's hard to tell, because I think probably growing up, I maybe didn't have quite as much of an appreciation of the work that defenders did on the ball, particularly central defenders. Is it a case that there are now more ball-playing centre-backs than there were? I'm not sure. I mean, whether they were allowed to step up just as much as they're encouraged to do now. I mean, you get like a Sheffield United formation they do underlapping centre backs that come from a back three. I think that to me feels like a sort of new invention of the modern game, or adaptation is probably a better word.
Definitely. But it's a solid team so far. We'll move on to the midfield. Who we got in right midfield?
Right midfield, but very much pushing further forward. So this is where you can become a 4-2-3-1 sort of. Brian Lowdrick is, to me, and probably I would have thought to most people, it's between him and one other player for the best that's ever played in Scotland. Brian Lowdrick was unbelievable. The things that he could do with the football, and he did it with such class and grace. I always think between him and the other player that we'll get to, because he'll be in my team as well, opposition fans or rival fans, they'd never like them, because they had that capability to absolutely destroy your team any time that they got the ball, and frequently did. But I think players like Brian Lowdrick, whatever team you supported, you would have a respect for a guy like that. Definitely. There are certain players that go out and antagonise opposition and opposition fans. Lowdrick just went about his business, and he knew he was better than everyone else. Again, it comes from that '98 World Cup, and you think of that sliding celebration where he, or that might even be 2002, because he was just at the top for so long, played for such big clubs, and then coming to Scotland as well. And the sort of personal addition that I've got for Brian Lowdrick is that the school I went to in Helensburgh, my mum was also the primary one teacher. So this would have been, I don't know what year this would have been actually, mid 90s sort of thing. And in my mum's primary one class, she had Tom Hartley, Beranger Bolly, and Nikolai Lowdrick in the one class. And so, and I think Colin Hendry's boy came as well. That might have been a wee bit later. So yeah, they would have made quite a good little school team, that lot. But I remember my mum saying, because we used to sort of hang about and try and catch a glimpse of the players as they came in. I remember my mum saying when I got home one day, and she was like, "You never guess who was in the classroom today." And I said, "Oh, did Brian come? Was he not training today?" And she goes, "No, it was Eric Cantona was in today," and he'd come up to stay with Basil Bolly,
right?
Who must have been friends with, and it was at the time, it was just after he'd done his kung fu kick against Crystal Palace, and he just thought he'd kind of get out of the public image a little bit, and he came up to Scotland and stayed with people. So Eric Cantona, you can add that to Cantona, Bolly, Lowdrick, and Hartley all in the one room. Brilliant.
See, in left midfield, who's in there?
Left midfield. So this was the one that gave me problems, because there's so many good players. I put Lowdrick over on the left so I could get Nakamura on the right. But then I realised I was getting too many Celtic and Rangers players, and then because they've had so much success over the years, you inevitably end up with a team of Celtic and Rangers players. So I wanted to try and get away from that, because I had Van Bronckhorst could have played over on the left, Alberts, Moravcik. I mean, there's so many good players. I've gone with Rudy Scatchell, who I just think, I mean, when you talk about Lowdrick on one side being the gentleman, and not to say that Scatchell's not, but he's one that he loved to wind up fans. He revelled in almost being the sort of villain a little bit.
Yeah.
And one of the main reasons is because he turned up on the big occasions.
Mm-hmm.
And with Hearts, he won 2 Scottish Cups. You particularly look at the 2012 one when he was older as well, but and back for his second spell. And you knew. I remember watching it with my friends, because I was working with Sky at the time, and there's a few Hibs fans in that office. So me not being a Hearts or a Hibs fan, and this other boy who was an editor, Adam, we used to wind up the Hibs fans a lot, and they knew as well that Rudy Scatchell was going to be the main guy in that final. So we won a few bets that day, let's just put it that way, on Rudy Scatchell scoring.
Brilliant. See, just before we move on to your centre mid, what's your kind of favourite memories? Obviously, you've commentated in some massive games, but what's your kind of favourite memories being a commentator?
I think there are a few that stick out. I mean, the best game that I've done was the Hibs 5, Rangers 5, end of 2017 season.
Before Gerrard.
And Neil Lennon's doing the aeroplane on the pitch. And there was a lot at stake that day, because I think there was a European place up for grabs.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And it was just a ridiculous game. You're just trying to, at the end, you're trying to work out what the score is, and you're expected to do a full-time wrap, but if so-and-so scored first and then this happened, you've got absolutely no idea. It's one of these things that people often don't realise when you get to the end of a 90 minutes and you've been commentating, and a lot of it just goes.
Yeah.
Some people come up to me at the end and they'll say, "Oh, if that one had gone in that hit the post, it's a different game," and you go, you just agree, because I don't remember that happening. It's just gone. You're so caught up in the moment, and then it's gone, and then another one happens. In a game like that, you've got 10 at least, 10 major moments, and you're just trying to make sure you get your words out and get your scorers right. But it was brilliant. I think since then, I'll give you two other. I think my favourite, or one of my favourite moments, would be Celtic beating Lazio. I was going to say away. I mean, home or away. Those two games were incredible. But I think to win in Rome, Celtic winning in Rome for the first time was quite incredible. And the way that they did it, as a commentator, you sometimes got to be really careful that you don't overcommit when you're saying things, and an assumption that a goal means that they win. Yeah. But Cham scored in like 93 and a half minutes, and that's one of those moments that you can just go for it, because barring something, a miracle, that's not going to change. And it meant that they topped the group. They went through. It's incredible the contrast to their performance in Europe this season. Yeah. Our first away game was in St. Petersburg, so that was pretty cool. And I'm somebody that loves to travel as well. So going to Russia, that was really good. It was in a big, it was at the time the most expensive stadium in the world in St. Petersburg. So I enjoyed that, and probably the main memory from before BT that sticks out was my first live game for Sky. Was Arbroath Rangers at Gayfield. Right, okay. And so obviously, you're a wee bit nervous, and you've done so much prep, got everything laid out and all this kind of thing, and got up to the gantry, which was just this sort of scaffolding platform that they'd built on top of the stand at Gayfield, which is just a sort of old roof. And I got up onto it, and the guy that was looking after us gave us a harness. I think it was myself and Andy Walker, and we were given a harness and strapped into this scaffolding, because it was so windy that it was just, we need to make sure that you're actually secure. I thought, well, I looked up into the sky and was like, that cloud is definitely coming in, and we don't have a roof. And I said to the guy, why didn't they put a roof on this? Because it's surely going to rain. And he goes, well, a roof would have acted as a sail, and it would have taken you and the roof below you, which is covering the fans, into the North Sea, which is 5 meters behind my back. Because the North Sea comes up to the wall behind the stand at Gayfield. So of course, as the teams are coming out, heavens open. And I'm going there, first live game. I've got, thousands of notes, stats on all the players, and within 2 minutes, you can't read any of it.
We'll move on to we'll finish up the team. We'll start off, we'll go into the centre of the midfield. Who have we got on the left side of centre midfield?
So this is probably where one sits a little, one goes a bit further forward. Darren Fletcher. Okay. Big competition for him with. And you could have picked any one of the three. I had Paul Lambert, Barry Ferguson, Darren Fletcher, and it's a toss-up. Again, my own rules kind of dictated that Darren got the nod. But I think Darren Fletcher, outstanding Scotland player. Yeah. Unfortunate, probably in a little bit of some of the era that he played in, because unsuccessful, not qualifying for tournaments. He's one that I think he held a lot of it together for Scotland when things weren't going well. He always turned up, and I think even later on into his career, when he still wasn't getting picked, and he was going along, still a big name in the English Premier League, and he was still happy. He would have turned up for Scotland, whatever. Yeah. So for his service to the national team, Darren Fletcher, and I think also when you look at his club career and when he was at Man United, And there was a good spell. There was a spell of about 2 or 3 years, because I lived with a few Arsenal fans at university in Edinburgh,
right?
And they used to sort of talk about Fletcher as being like, come on, he shouldn't really be in a Man United side. And after a while, they realised that he was actually their most important player. For a while, there was probably maybe 2 seasons where he was their absolute key man. He wasn't the guy getting the goals and the assists, but in the midfield, he was the one that was holding it all together. And so I think that he's probably undervalued in that sense of just how good he was in world terms, probably, because if you're a guy that's one of the most important players in a Man United team, then you're up there.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. But we'll go further forward. Who's in the attacking midfield position?
So slightly further forward, again, you could fit in or reel off. I mean, because I've obviously mentioned Van Bronckhorst, Alberts, Moravcik, Nakamura. You can play all those guys in there as well. Paul Hartley, I think for his time in that Hearts team, that was really successful under Burley. Before it sort of all went a little bit wrong, and Latipi as well. But I've gone with Ian Jess.
Okay.
So going back a little bit further, and maybe it might just be because it's in my head, because he celebrated his 50th birthday the other day.
Yeah.
And so a bunch of his videos were online, and it just reminded me of the spectacular nature of the goals that he scored.
Yeah.
And I think it was probably at a time, I think nowadays you probably look at Celtic and Rangers they're so far ahead of everyone else. The budgets, and it's happened all around the world. Mm-hmm. Celtic and Rangers will struggle to compete in the Champions League because teams from the Big Five leagues financially can just blow them away.
Yeah.
And Celtic and Rangers can do that to everyone else in Scotland. I think when Ian Jess was playing for Aberdeen, there would be 2-3 players from that Aberdeen team that would easily get into a Celtic or Rangers, and probably more.
Yeah.
Like Willie Miller, I forgot to mention him as one of the defenders that I was considering. There's loads of them that would have walked into those teams.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, that doesn't happen, because if you get a guy doing well for half a season at another club in Scotland, if they're good enough, they get snapped up straight away by Celtic, Rangers, or they go down south.
Yeah.
And Ian Jess, I mean, the talent that he had, just looking through the goals that he was scoring, he could dribble, he could blast them from 40 yards. Great player. We used to holiday up north, and we stayed with sort of family friends who were all Aberdeen fans, so that was drilled into me early, how much they loved Ian Jess.
Brilliant. We'll move on to the strikers. I just want to ask you as well, obviously since the coronavirus has kicked in, you're doing a lot more like interviews at this, like kind of touchline interviews. Like, how are you finding doing that recently?
I mean, it's something that I've always done in my career. Started out doing that, and sometimes it's required anyway, because it's just resources. If the commentator's there, they sometimes just say, head down and interview the managers. I'm not a big fan of it when you've been broadcasting for 90 minutes, because you don't have the time. If I was there as a reporter, I would be sitting in the stand, and throughout the game you'd be making notes, and at about 70 minutes, when you can see the story unfolding, you'd start to think what questions you want to ask them. And I think more importantly, how you want to phrase them. Yeah. Because the way that you ask a question can really determine what sort of a mood you get or a reaction you get from a manager. And if you don't get it right, you can come across as antagonistic. But at the same time, sometimes you need to be direct and to the point. So it's a real skill, and Emma Dodds is usually the reporter with us. Ailey Barber did it before, and they take the time to work out exactly how they want to deliver that question to get the desired response. And I think when you commentate, like I did a game Wednesday night with St Mirren and Rangers, and I finished the game 90 minutes, and then you do your little wrap up and you give the score, and then I had to just drop everything that I had and run around the outside of the stadium, because you can't just go down to the front, so you've got to go through all the COVID protocols, and then you chap on the door to get in because nobody's expecting anybody coming into the stadium at that time, and then they take your name and you run up, and who was it? Jamie McGrath was already waiting there for me. Yeah. So you go from finishing a game to here's somebody in front of you, and then you get the finger wag from the floor manager to say, right, that's you live, and you go, oh right, Jamie, and so you've got to think this is a live interview, and I've just got the entire game rushing through my head, and you've got to try and compose yourself to really to think what I need to get out of this interview. And you can get tricky ones as well, because in the last few weeks and with the European games, I've done Neil Lennon when he's been under major pressure, and they've had poor results in it was after the one in Prague, and it is difficult. It's not a role that it's not my favourite. I wasn't always a big fan before I went to BT. I used to do lots of press conferences and things. Yeah, I'm not a very confrontational person, but I find the role can make you that, because you can't shirk asking. If you don't ask certain questions, you're not doing your job. Yeah. And somebody like Neil Lennon, he gets it. He understands the business that you have to ask us a question. So whether he might not like it at the time, but I think afterwards he understands that everyone has a job to do.
Yeah, and see, even like obviously you touched on like Neil's under a bit of pressure as well, and even on Wednesday night, like Steven Gerrard as well. Can you tell when in that kind of situation are they not in the mood to talk? I think that it's obviously obligations kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any manager wants to really speak straight after a result when they're still, their emotions are heightened, and you're right, it is just an obligation. Yeah. And probably sometimes they say things that they don't want to because they're still in that heat of battle mentality. They've not had time to go away and digest it. I thought Steven Gerrard was very good on Wednesday night because he was obviously very disappointed. That was a big blow for Rangers to go out of a tournament that, the mega favourites to win it. Yeah. So he would be really, really disappointed with that. But what he was saying was, these players have given me 27 games without defeat. It's not to be. You can't overreact when something like that. There's a danger that then you do damage to your players. So that was one. Support the players. They've given me everything for 27 games. Today they weren't quite at it, and I take the heat for this one. So I that's maybe something that's taken Stephen a couple of years to
definitely
to get to that sort of level, and maybe take himself out of the heat of the battle. I don't know, but I thought he dealt with it very well. I wasn't like firing horror questions at him and things because he's not a man under intense pressure right now because they're playing so well.
Yeah, definitely. We'll close up the team. We'll start off with the left striker. Who's in there?
James McFadden.
Right, okay.
I was in Paris when he scored that goal, which it's just one of the. I was going to say best moments of my footballing life, but it's one of the best moments of my life. It was just awesome. It was again early on, and because it was that group with with Italy, France, Ukraine, and Lithuania. That was the first group that I travelled with, and there was a really good bunch of boys out in Paris for that game. So really fond memories of that. And as a Scotland player, he was always a talisman. You knew if you had, he wasn't always at his best, but you knew that he could either produce a 10 out of 10 performance from nowhere, or he could be having a 3 out of 10 and do something that was just nobody else on the pitch could do.
Yeah, definitely.
No matter who the opposition was, he just had that ability and played with. He's one of those throwback players a wee bit. It's almost like street football. It's all about those skills I can imagine him learning as a kid. And I think one of my worries with modern football is that so many of the players are they're being overcoached. They're going through academies, and you've now got these technically gifted players who never give the ball away, but at the same time, how much are they affecting the game? Their pass retention is at 99%, and they're making 150 passes a game. But how many of them are actually doing anything? It's one of my slight worries about academy football, is that you're maybe taking that natural ability out of the players a wee bit. But Faddy had that natural ability. You couldn't coach that out of him.
No, definitely not.
There's so many goals that come to mind when I think of him, but obviously Paris is the main one. I think Ukraine, Macedonia.
The goal against Holland always sticks out for me. The one that was it. It's one
that was early on, and that was him linking up with Darren Fletcher, and because votes had just come in, and there weren't any young players with any experience. Craig Brown had done such a good job with Scotland, but it was such an aging team, and Bertie votes, he gets slated really for, or at the time he did. I think maybe people realise now that maybe there was a bit more to it.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the one that he tried out a lot of players, but he gave McFadden and Fletcher their opportunities. You're right, that goal was it felt like it was a kind of new era for Scotland, and it didn't quite pan out, but there were still good moments. I mean, beating Holland 1-0 at Hampden, we'll just pretend that away game didn't happen.
That was one of the best games I've ever been at, that game. That was such an unbelievable atmosphere. But we'll finish up with the second striker, who's I think we know already who it is, but let's get the name in.
Henrik Larson. Again, like Lowdrick, very similar things to what I was saying about him, and how I don't think. I mean, they will. A Rangers fan would never admit to liking Henrik Larson. A Celtic fan would never admit to liking Brian Lowdrick. But I think both deep down would have respect for them, because
definitely.
They were both gentlemen. They just took the level in Scotland just beyond where it was. To get players like that and get a bit of longevity out of them, for Larson to stay at Celtic for 7 years, scoring the amount of goals that he did at the level, in Champions League and on the UEFA Cup run, and to not be lured away, I think shows a bit of loyalty from him as well. And he could score goals of all sorts of nature. He had it all. He could dribble, unbelievable in the air for a guy that's not tall. Phenomenal in the air. His standing jump was unbelievable. And I used to, again, the boys that I lived with at university were the Arsenal fans. England used to always play Sweden in major tournaments. And every time I would say to them, watch out for Henrik Larson. And every time that they would palm it off and say, oh no, he's playing in Scotland. And every time Larson would get every time. And I think testament to him is I think if you ask most players that played with him, I mean, he played up front with Ibrahimovic.
Yeah.
Chris Sutton always says, the best player that he played with, Zlatan. I think has said it as well. And,
yeah, he has.
And he's played with some ridiculously good players. So
as well as that, he left Celtic, went on and won a Champions League with Barcelona, and was probably the main reason they won that game. That was always stands out to me.
In that game, they were not winning that until then. You wonder what his club career could have been like had he left earlier, because I know Celtic got him when he wasn't a big deal. I remember seeing him for the first time in the '94 World Cup with the long dreads, and not knowing anything about him. And of course, he arrived at Celtic 3 or 4 years after that. To not really much of a fanfare. But you just wonder if it's at his peak. If he'd gone, he could have played anywhere in the world.
Oh yeah,
and he could have won titles everywhere. He could have won more than one European Cup. He was that good.
Brilliant team. Really enjoyed hearing that team. I really enjoyed it. I just want to ask you as well, just a thing as well. Obviously, you've got the likes of Chris Sutton and Ali McCoy at BT. What's it like behind the camera with them? Like how good is the banter off camera?
Yeah, it's good. They all get on well. It's kind of just like what you see on screen.
Yeah.
Chris loves to wind folk up. He loves an argument. I get on because I've been doing a lot of filming with Stephen Craigan and Michael Stewart this year as well, and I get on really well with them. Ali is exactly what you see, which it isn't just an act. He's just a top guy. I took him down the road from Pataudry one day. I was just like, what am I going to speak to Ali McCoist about for 3 hours in a car? And honestly, it was great fun. Had a great time. So yeah, it's good fun. I mean, we had the sort of BT Sport Winnebago that used to be a really good sort of central hub, which no other broadcaster I'd worked for had that. You used to just kind of turn up and stand about and get in the way, and then you just had somewhere else to sit and chat. And that's when most of the debates on screen probably form is before the game, because like Chris will be testing to see where people's opinions are and then how he can counteract it. It's a really good bunch. It's a shame that we don't have the league anymore, but we still meet up for games every now and again. As you say, like Premier have taken it on, and we're still doing the European stuff. But everything's so different with COVID. You turn up at games now, and you see your co-commentator, and that's about it.
Yeah. So, obviously, you're still going to be doing kind of Scottish football for the rest of the season. How do you see the season going from here?
Good question. I mean, obviously, we've got cup final on Sunday, which is going to be great. Weird having a December Scottish Cup final, but we're used to having a Betfred final around this time. So, I mean, Celtic will go into that as heavy favourites, but they've shown weakness over the last wee while. It's whether they've turned the corner, I think, and Hearts are good enough to give them a match. Yeah. I think the 2019 final, Hearts were pretty unlucky not to win that, going ahead, and then without Odsonne Edouard, I don't think Celtic would have won that. They obviously got the goals, but Celtic weren't quite at it that day. And so if Hearts can sow a little bit of the seeds of doubt back into Celtic, then and Hearts they're a proper cup team. They never go away, Hearts. No matter how bad a league season they're having, somehow in the cups they're always in semis and finals. So looking forward to that. The Betfred is, I think it's great. I mean, I touched on it before about the lack of variety. I think it's great that it's Hibs, St Johnstone, St Mirren and Livingston in the semi-finals. I mean, I can't think of many times in the last 20 years when you wouldn't have had the two Glasgow clubs, Hearts, Aberdeen, in semi-finals. So good on them. I mean, Hibs will go into it as favourites. We've done St Mirren in the last couple of rounds, and they've been outstanding. Mm-hmm. Really, really. They played Aberdeen off the park. They got a lucky goal to win it, but they were the best team on the day. And against Rangers, who nobody had really got close to in Scotland. They'd drawn a couple of games, but the first only St Mirren and Benfica have scored 3 against Rangers. Only Hibs had scored 2 domestically. So I think Jim Goodwin's got a really good thing going on there. So that's probably a final I'd quite like to see. Hibs St Mirren might be quite good. But I'll be happy whatever it is. Like I say, you want stories to develop. So next up after that for me will be hopefully Rangers in Europe. Nothing confirmed. I'd love to do those games. I did Leverkusen last year, so I'd hope I can, but I don't know. And I think Rangers have got a really good chance of doing well in Europe. They probably should get past the next round and into a last 16. If they could go further than they did last year, get to quarterfinals, you're getting into exciting territory there.
Definitely.
So you never know. Like, you look at the teams that Rangers knocked out on their way to the 2008 final, and I know the football landscape is very, very different now. It's very difficult for teams out with the major leagues to do well in Europe. But they've got a good. I think they're really well set up for Europe. I think they're coached so well, particularly the double 10s, the 2 number 10s that they play. I think work so hard and break down opposition possession, and they break so well. So whatever happens, I'm really looking forward to that. And the league, I think, was it 13 points at the moment? Celtic don't play in the league this weekend, so Rangers can go back to 16. It's so difficult for a chasing team, even if you've got games in hand, when you see that big lead like that. A lot might come down to the game on the 2nd of January. But Rangers were a lot better than Celtic in the first Old Firm game.
Do you think the no fans is having an impact in both teams? Like, obviously, like I kind of want to ask you that as well. Like, I would say like a lot of Rangers players are playing well without the pressure of the crowd, whereas I think a lot Celtic are certainly struggling with that. Would you kind of go along with that?
Yeah. I don't think any team should have it different. Why? Maybe it shows how much of an asset it is to Celtic. But then I guess when you're doing well, a crowd always helps. When it probably became difficult for Rangers when results weren't going their way. You take the sort of January onwards last season, and things don't go so well. And it was right near the lockdown when they lost to Hamilton at Ibrox, and that will have been probably part of feeling the fans' pressure. Whereas Celtic, when they're riding the crest of a wave, everything's going well. The fans are behind them. Whether fans being in this season at Celtic Park would have helped them, I'm not sure. Might have helped in the European games when they, I can't imagine they'd have lost 4-1 to Sparta Prague with 60,000 behind them. But from the first game between them, I thought, and it goes back to my previous point about, I think, the way that that Rangers team are coached, particularly out of possession. It looked to me like that game felt like it was a game of tactics, and because the emotion wasn't, it didn't feel like an Old Firm game. And I think Rangers got their tactics absolutely spot on, as they have in in the last few between the two, because the one at Celtic Park previous to that, and the Betfred Cup final as well, when they were by far the better team.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think everyone wants fans back in. It's weird as a broadcaster.
Yeah, I was going to ask that.
It's so strange. Like, games feel like pre-season.
That's
taken me months to build games up myself, because you've got nothing. Like, I don't like speaking all the time. Mm-hmm. I'm a bit more of a quieter commentator. I think I like to hear the crowd myself, and I like viewers to be able to determine their own atmosphere of what's actually going on, rather than just listening to the commentator talking all the time. So I try and limit that as much as I can. I mean, I'm sure people still get annoyed, but I really miss it, particularly going to away games. I mean, we can't travel anyway, but European away trips, that's my favourite footballing experience, is listening to different noises that you get from crowds. I absolutely love it. And you can't do any of that anymore, or not for now. So hopefully it comes back soon. But it's weird as a broadcaster. And do you know what? One of the other things that I noticed, some of my mates sent me clips from the game on Wednesday night, and they were like, "Well, was your mic not working or something?" Because I think it was just the SPFL had put up some highlights of the game, and my voice is in the background, but you can hear it, but it's faint.
Yeah.
But I sent them the clips from Premier Sports and said, no, that's what was broadcast. And what they'd sent me is just the cameras and picking up my voice, because that's what's beaming around the entire stadium.
Really?
When I went over to the other side to do the interviews, after running around the outside and Jamie McGrath waiting for me, and I saw a few other colleagues from Sky, and they said to me, "Yeah, we got a 90-minute commentary. We heard everything that you were saying." So if you think also, managers, players, directors, referees, they're hearing it as well.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Which is weird to think, oh, you get yourself into bother.
Brilliant. I've absolutely enjoyed it, Rory. It's been an absolute pleasure to be on. I can't thank you enough for doing it. Brilliant team. Brilliant. Thanks very much, Rory. Cheers.
Brilliant, mate. Thank you.